Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. This, by the way, is my anniversary. I would say 40 years ago, I got my first job here in the energy industry in Denver, Colorado, in the old Petroleum Club building. I'm happy to say that I'm still employed, and I'm happy to say that this is probably, in my 40 years walking up these streets of downtown Denver, this is probably the most optimistic time I've ever seen in our business. And that takes me through the low prices in the $3 range per barrel of the 70s, running up to 40 in the 80s and crashing back down to $9 a barrel in 1986. The escalation we saw after that and the softness in the mid-90s. So why am I so excited about where we're at today? Well, I can tell you that it's because, especially I would say, here in the Rockies, we have the right people, we have the right tools, we have the right resources, and unlike in the past, we virtually have all the capital that we need that's available to us. And that's really because of the types of rates of return that have already been discussed by the previous speakers. And so I'll just say that I can remember that in 1971, I used to sort of run down the escalator in the old, what is today, Wells Fargo building in order to get to work. Today, I'm a little slower, but I'm still as optimistic. I really love getting to my job every morning, and I think that this period of time, because of all the opportunities that are available to us, especially here in the Rockies, is an exceptional period. So now I'm going to answer a question that was asked earlier, and that was, could we get to 4 million barrels a day? And I believe the answer to that is yes. And I've heard Dan say 2 million barrels a day, no problem. And I agree with that, and I think that's from additional drilling. But I'd also like to point out to you that there's a brand new trend in the United States today, and that is the capture of CO2. And really in an apolitical manner. By that I mean if you go back, you can go back 4 presidential administrations and look at the reports that have been put out by the Department of Energy, the U.S. Department of Energy, as to what can be done when we capture CO2 produced off of our power plants and put it into existing oil reservoirs. There's an extra 2 million barrels a day there. So that's why I believe there's definitely 4 million barrels that we can go after here in the United States. So let me just take you forward. If you're a speed reader, this is all of our forward-looking statements, which basically says that this is not a riskless industry, so try to keep that in mind. Here's the other reason why I'm pretty optimistic about what's going on. At Whiting, we just set a brand new production record. 50,000 barrels a day gross, 31,000 barrels a day net, coming out of the Williston Basin, net to Whiting. Second, half of our exploration program, that is half of our $1.6 billion budget for this year, which is up substantially, as you can see from last year, is going to looking for brand new reserves. Where are we doing that? Well, we're doing it predominantly in the Rockies, because if you look at that slide into the Rockies, you'll see over 700,000 net undeveloped acres there. And we have the pedal to the metal in order to develop that resource. As you know, Whiting was an early mover into the Bakken, and now as we've tested the full sequence of the Bakken Three Forks hydrocarbon system, we have established production in the Scallion, in the Middle Bakken, both the B and the C zones, in that dashed line that lies between the Lower Bakken Shale and the Three Forks, which we call the Sanish Sand or the Pronghorn Sand, and the Three Forks itself. The tools. As you can see, we have one of the tools here. This is a depiction of what we actually see on microseismic. Here we've spaced our horizontal well bores 1,500 feet apart in the Middle Bakken. We've fracked it, and we can tell that not only are we getting an effective frack up and down the wellbore, but we're also getting an effective frac out for about 750 feet away from the wellbore. So when we drill another well 1,500 feet apart, frac it, we're doing a good job of developing that reservoir. Just to give you an idea of the economics that we're after here, this slide, which shows our range of results in the Middle Bakken in the Sanish field, shows clearly that there are tremendous economics available to us here. If you look in the far right-hand column at the $90 oil price level, that's WTI, by the way, and with reserves ranging from 950,000 BOEs to 400,000 BOEs, our ROIs basically go from 3.5 to 1 to about 8.5 to 1. Our payout time is essentially from 9/10 of a year to under a half a year, and our IRRs range from 133% to over 1,100%. So why do I run down that escalator still, or at least try to be a little quicker down it in order to get in the office in the morning? It's because it's so exciting to be there. Below the Bakken is the Three Forks. And I'm here today to tell you that, in my opinion, the Three Forks is going to be every bit as good and every bit as extensive as the Bakken. To date, I would say our average EOR there is about 300 to 400,000 BOEs. And as you can see here, that's about a 1.2-year payout. It's about 3.2 to 1 on our money, and it's about a 92% IRR. So our results in the Three Forks have been great, and I think they're going to continue to be good. Moving on to our drilling budget, as you can see, we're putting our money where our mouth is. If you look at the second column from the left, our current exploration dollars, $767 million of our $1.6 billion budget is being directed right here in the Northern Rockies. Not only at our existing Sanish field, where we're essentially in a solid development phase, but also at Lewis and Clark, where we've kicked off essentially 7 large development areas. Enough, frankly, that when we look across both our P1, P2, P3, and resource base, Whiting currently has over 4,800 identified future drilling locations across everywhere that we're active. Moving on, how does Whiting stack up against some of the other results? Well, I think it's because we've been fortunate to find good rock, but as a result of that rock, and I think as a result of the technology that we're applying, when we check our performance, as we like to do, to benchmark ourselves against our peers, we see that in the most recent 6-month period that the wells that Whiting has drilled has typically recovered between 17,000 and about 30,000 more barrels of oil in their first 6 months of production than our competitors. And again, I think that's because we've been applying the science, specifically, I might say, some core data. I think we're the only people in downtown Denver to have a core lab that we've established right in our building. So we bring our core in just a few hours after we've taken it in the field and begin to analyze it in order to find the sweet spots in the Bakken Three Forks hydrocarbon system, and so that we know where to most effectively and efficiently and profitably put that horizontal wellbore, because it varies across the Bakken Three Forks hydrocarbon system. I mentioned 7 large prospects that we're after. These are among, in my opinion, the most exciting plays in the United States. I mentioned our Lewis and Clark prospect. You can see there that we have 254,000 net acres, and recently we brought in wells like the Clements, which came in at 2,108 barrels a day, and the Hecker that came in at 3,611 barrels a day. You'll also see that up at our new Hidden Bench prospect that we've just begun drilling, our 2 most recent wells, in fact, the first 2 wells that we drilled there were 2,450 and 3,692 BOE a day IP wells. And then some of our competitors off there to the west at our Missouri Breaks area and our Starbuck area have come in and drilled wells within our acreage position outline that are basically in the 2,900 to 1,800 BOE a day range. This next slide is a little bit, I'm going to say, technical. It is a cross-section. It shows the results. I'm going to go back to that last slide. It shows the results across all of these areas that I mentioned, that basically we've been bringing in wells at essentially between about 1,800 BOEs a day and 3,600 BOEs a day. And it will take you from point number 1 on that cross-section to point number 9. So all the way across Lewis and Clark to Hidden Bench, Missouri Breaks, and then up to Starbuck. And I'll just cut to the chase here for you. What does it mean? It means, if you look at the average IP in the far right-hand column on this slide, that our average IP across our entire acreage position is about 1,471 BOEs a day. And with some of our more recent wells, as the one we drilled at the area we call Elkhorn Ranch, which is within our Lewis and Clark prospect area, 2,100 BOEs, and then over at Missouri Breaks and Hidden Bench, as you can see in that area, wells have been coming in at 27 to 2,900 BOEs a day. Why are we so enthusiastic about Lewis and Clark? Well, it's right there. It's because it has over 500 total locations. And why are we thinking that the reserves are good? And that's because the decline curve is telling us that. It's telling us that our wells that have been on production longest there are between 400,000 and 500,000 BOEs in terms of an EUR. Just getting back to our Sanish, this is a pretty quick picture of what we have yet to do at Sanish, which is drill another 260 wells and bring our total up there to 549. And then I'd call your attention to the 60-day average for our Sanish Three Forks wells here and our Lewis and Clark Three Forks wells. Why did I say that the Three Forks, I think, is going to be as good outside of Sanish and maybe better? And there you can see it in our 60-day rates. They're about 500 barrels a day over the first 60 days as opposed to 400 barrels a day elsewhere. I'm going to conclude here just by saying that the takeaway capacity out of the basin is rising. It's about up to 1 million barrels a day based upon everything that's been announced. We're applying the same kind of science that I've just described, predominantly core analysis, also out in Weld County, Colorado, where our first true test of the Niobrara just came in at 1,321 BOEs a day. And we're using similar approach at our Big Tex prospect in the Second Bone Springs, where our first true horizontal well is currently producing 788 barrels a day. With that, I'm going to be quiet and turn it back over to Jim. Thanks again. Look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Jim, and I suspect that there are going to be quite a few questions coming out as to the technologies and the science that you've been using to get such substantial increase in tests out of the Williston. I want to give a special thanks to our next guest speaker. He's here on kind of a short notice. Rob Woolman is Vice President of Exploration with Pennwest, who he has been with since 2009 in Vice President of Exploration position. Prior to that, he's been involved with many startup and operations of several junior oil and gas companies. I think since 2009, a director of Midway Energy, and between 2006 and 2009, president and chief executive officer and director of Trafalgar Energy Limited. So join me in welcoming Rob, please.